I'm Victor LaGroon. I'm the former Chief Diversity Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs, Biden-Harris administration, and staunch advocate for Blue Star families. Really quickly, I want to just say something about Kathy, not just because everyone else has, but I have my own Kathy story. When the city of Chicago secured the Warrior Games, and we knew that we needed to accommodate not just our wounded warriors and warfighters and trainers, but also their families, there was only really one partner that we could reach out to that actually already was thinking about that work. Because as you know, when we return home, a little different than when we left home, home is where you get your healing. You have a number of appointments and you have a number of doctors and systems that you're going to navigate, but at the same time, home is where you will get put back together. Your parents, your spouse, your loved ones, your family really do take on that work. And without critical organizations like Blue Star Families to support that family, to give them added direction, to give them an ear to listen to and a shoulder to cry on, this work just does not happen. So for me, it's an amazing opportunity for me to have this chance to give back, to serve as a moderator for this panel, and more importantly, if Kathy calls, just answer the phone and say yes. Right? That's the easiest, best way to take a path. So I really quickly wanted to talk about our campaign for inclusion and why it matters, and why it matters to all of us here. I had the amazing opportunity to wear the uniform of my country in the United States Army and serve with some of the best and brightest Americans I ever could have met. But we were from everywhere. Every corner, every community, every culture, from South Carolina to Minnesota to West Virginia to a city kid like me from DC to places in Texas, you name it, that's where we came from. And we were able to put our best thinking together to execute on very important missions that had we not had that diversity of thinking, we would have not come up with the level of solutions that we needed to advance our work today. And that's important for our country because our country is evolving and growing and changing, and we have to make those adjustments with it. And because of that, who is an American military family has changed. What that composition looks like has changed. When I came in 2003, all of the pictures looked the same, the posters looked the same, the commercials were the same, but there were many, many people I served with that were not being reflected in that experience. And today that's changed, in large part to the work that you see taking place with the Blue Star Families initiative, but more importantly, with the team of people who are committed to this work. Every time I've met CT, she is coming from, going to, doing something, making sure something has happened. There are no downtimes for these folks. This data is extremely important. Having worked in academia, God bless you on this one, this is always a tough, tall tell. And finally, I want to thank the board and this board's leadership. Your organization only goes as far as your board takes it. And they have committed themselves to this work. And in like fashion, many of us here in this room today are equally committed to this work. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to call our panelists up and have them join us on stage, starting with General Juan Ayala. Where are you at, sir? Oh, there you go. Outstanding. Our good friend, Bryan Amrock. Dr. Knight, you'll come back and join us on the stage one more time. Colonel Holland. And last but not least, C.T. Moss. All right. So we're going to do a little sharing because sharing is caring. We're going to share the microphones. Please don't slide off the stage. I'm a little worried about you on the edge over there.
Okay.
Listen, you break an airman, it's going to cost you. So I don't want any hand receipts showing up in my house. So let's keep it together, folks. So our first real point where we want to get started is to talk about the shared identities, bridging those gaps, but also bridging those communities. So I really want to start at the work that you've been doing in San Antonio. I've really been amazed by that. And Juan, if you could, discuss a little bit about the role of the military and veteran identity. Yes. And how that bridges those communities within.
Well, the city of San Antonio has a 300-year history with the military. There's 250,000 veterans in the city of San Antonio, and leadership trumps everything. And it starts at the top. It starts at city government that has reached out to the military community for years, for decades, and said, how can we support not only your active duty, but how can we support your families? And there's a lot of things that have been done to reach out and make sure that our military families are taken care of. But I like to say this, is that we can, tie all the yellow ribbons we want, we can shake everybody's hand and thank everybody for their service. But unless a community invests, and I'm talking about funds, in kind, manpower, and support, it's not going to make a difference. It's just talk. And so what I think that our city has done, and I'm sure Hill Air Force Base has done the same, and Hampton Roads and others, is that we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in fellowships for spouse employment with a 80% hiring rate in corporations. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Joint Base San Antonio, which is the largest joint base in the Department of Defense, to take the overflow of that huge daycare waiting list that is out for our military families. And we've also included our veterans in our San Antonio's Ready to Work program, which is, again, fellowships. And that's just 3 examples of some of the things that we've done. But I think the more strategic view is we want to keep our bases in our city. And how we do that is through investing in commander infrastructure projects and commander priorities. So there's a lot of things I think we can do. It's all about personal relationships. It's not personal, it's intensely personal. And we continually reach out. Our mayor likes to say the military is in our DNA and there is no fence line. We consider the city of San Antonio one big installation. And when members of the military hear that, because we bring them in to meet the mayor, we have 43 flag officers active duty in the city of San Antonio. That makes a big difference. And everything permeates from the mayor, the senior leaders in the military, down to everybody, to include the families.
Outstanding. So those private-public partnerships really do work.
You have to work at them, but they really do work. And you really have to twist some arms, I hate to say, to get when we started the spouse program, none of the corporations wanted to do it. No, they're not here long enough. They're not smart enough. They're not this, they're not that. They're only going to be here for 2 years. And once the first corporations, the USAs, the Valeros, the Toyota started hiring them, I went, oh my God, now we have about 60 to 70 corporations in the city that are hiring, and there's a line for more.
That's amazing. Thank you. So Bryan, I want to skip to you really quickly. Please share your insights on how community organizations, community events, and also identity, how that intersects, but also how they really do support one another as we start bringing in that influx of personnel and those families digging roots in our communities.
So we learned in some of the data that was presented earlier that safety and well-being is a big part of building a community. And I want to say something that we talked about earlier, that we kind of look at things as from a perspective that community is mental health. And we all know that mental health is a major concern for our veterans and our active military soldiers, sailors, Marines. And so we look at it from building a safe space for military families to come into our space. We look at building a safe space out in the community by being at over 250 events within the community every year. We are on the bases giving DEI training and helping to create leaders who are well informed and that have the information necessary to support their troops. Beyond that, we also work at building social networks, kind of like what the General talked about, in that we reach out to community agencies to find out who people can turn to, what resources are available, where an LGBTQ community member can buy a wedding cake. We started the first ever I can't even think of the word right now. directory for the state of Virginia so that military members, LGBTQ community members know where safe spaces are. They know that which businesses are welcoming to them. They know where to look for hiring that is inclusive to maybe their queer spouse, whatever the case may be. To us, it's about building that community and creating safe spaces where people feel welcomed and they feel seen.
Amazing. And that really does contribute to belonging, right?
It does.
Welcome families.
From our perspective, I mean, I think that the statistics kind of show that being a community that has had an LGBT center for 35 years, building that community and letting people know that community is there for them, it has worked.
Outstanding. Thank you. Dr. Knight, you kind of raced through your presentation, so I wanted to double back and see you.
People tell me I sometimes talk too fast, but I had a lot of info to...
Never too fast.
Yeah.
Just fast enough. Can you share with us on how addressing the role of research in identifying and supporting the needs of diverse military families really does take hold?
I can answer that in two perspectives, or two ways. One, until we know what the challenge is, it is very difficult to figure out what the solution might be. So data really needs to be our guide. And two, I think research is, I'm a former academic. I left academia very intentionally. I love academic concepts, really, really do. And there is always the question of how to put theory into practice and also what theories we are putting into practice. And I think I'm going to answer this from a future perspective in terms of research and what we can or should or could be doing. And I think the future of this general research question and sector, some of it is multi-methodological, as we saw. It's qualitative, it's quantitative. Interviews are great. Stats are also great. And so much of our research from this year, so much of, frankly, the comments of folks on the stage has to do with trust networks, gaps in them, how to form them, how to sustain them, and frankly, back to your question, sir, how do we know we're doing it? And I think there is so much potential with research and incorporating data science and social network theory to actually be able to demonstrate over time that we are creating stronger connections between not just communities writ large, because also let's define a community. I said I was a former academic. I like to define our terms. But individuals. And how does that individual's relationship change with another individual's relationship over time? And one of the things that Kathy and I and the rest of the Blue Star Families leadership team, the Campaign for Inclusion team, and our applied research team are really starting to dig into is, yes, we are a military family serving organization, and those military families are embedded in civilian communities. So how do we demonstrate using research and data that we are creating a stronger civic fabric across the U.S. over time to solve for many of these challenges? So that's there's lots we can do with research. I could go on, but I'll pause.
I love it. So I want to transition to our next section. We're really going to get into the role of community in military installations. And I think this is important in large part because how we first welcome them to an installation is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. Because many of our service members will branch out into the neighboring communities as they move off base. And that can yield a different type of experience for our service members. So Colonel Holland, I'd like to go to you now. Tell us more about Project One, and also a little bit more about the efforts at Hill Air Force Base and the surrounding communities.
Certainly, I'm going to do my best to make this very short. I might have to talk very fast to do it. I want to say the first thing that happened is we realized that this was a team effort, right? So when the DOJ report came out, Bryan referenced, the state had just enough, or the school district had just enough leverage that they could have chosen to fight it in court. They opted not to their credit. The base, we could have looked at them and said, hey, you guys fix your problem. But we didn't and we couldn't, right? Because my job is military readiness, operational readiness for in my case, airmen, and I actually have some soldiers on the installation, even some guardians as well. And so I can't have ready airmen if I don't have supported and cared for families, right? And even our airmen have to feel like they belong because we don't have enough airmen to have them worried about anything other than their job when they're at work. And so we realized that we had the same we had different goals, right? The school district wanted to have a safe environment and teach kids, and I needed a good safe space to send our kids to school. So different goals, but they aligned. And so we kind of went from that effort. And then I have my personal background is I grew up with my father in the Army, moved 11 times before I left home. And then in the Air Force, I have moved, I guess, I've moved 14 times, so I should be at 25 places in my life. I'm only at 24 because I moved back. And so I've moved a lot, and I understand what that feels like. I also have a background in doing a lot of statistical work, and so I really appreciate data. And so we were super happy when Blue Star said they would bring us into this program. And then I also have a little bit of an education in public administration. And so the approach for belonging that I took was a civic one, right? Because every mayor, that's what an installation commander is, it's the military mayor. And they all want to have people who feel like they belong because they want their cities to be the best cities. I want Hill Air Force Base, regardless of how many assignments somebody has, to be the best assignment of someone's career. And to be honest, the state of Utah and the surrounding communities want people to think that too and move back, right? So we all have goals that align somehow. And so the approach that I took was kind of super simple, right? Can only count to 5. So Project One is not a program, it's a framework. And so we said, hey, what are the levers that I can pull to try to create a sense of belonging for the community? The first was airmen and families, right? What can we do amongst ourselves to develop a sense of community? Because we all wear a uniform, but sometimes we don't do things to make ourselves feel like we even belong in our shops or in our units, right? In our companies, our brigades. And so what are we doing in that space? The second is our schools, because we tolerate a lot of stuff for ourselves that we would never tolerate for our kids. And that's where you saw family status, right, was a big driver in belonging. And so what levers can we pull there to do something with? State of Utah delivered huge there for us. They invested, and they put military family therapists in the Davis School District, state funded, and made a difference, huge difference for our families. Third area was governments and colleges. At first, that's where we had diversity, equity, inclusion kind of agencies, and so we thought we had a natural tie. It turns out that government DEI is not always as progressive, maybe, as you would hope they would be for recruiting and outreach, right? More kind of internally focused. And then the state of Utah is part of the national dialogue about DEI and where that belongs. But it turns out that government has a lot of access to different programs they can give us access to. Colleges particularly, and I'll share one. So the college just north of us, Weber State, typically, to be part of an activities group, you need to have a student ID. They basically said, hey, if you're age 18 to 24, and no one's really enforcing it, so it could be up or down, right, if you have a military ID, you can come be a part of our clubs and groups. And so instead of having to create your own Magic the Gathering club, you could do that in the community and not have the burden of bearing that yourself. Also helping connect with the community. Fourth area, community partnerships, Blue Star Families, USO, our local military affairs committees, things that we're doing. The fourth is religious, which is super important in the state of Utah because of the weight that church carries, but I think applies everywhere, right? So it's just a framework. And the truth is, if you're not acting in all of those areas, you're missing an opportunity to create belonging because everybody's piece of everyone's identity falls in those different places.
So by minimizing the culture of othering, you've increased belonging, and that's really impacted your readiness. And I think that's something that certainly should be mirrored throughout the forces. So thank you for that. General, I want to come back to you. So the city of San Antonio, as a military city USA, as you call it.
Trademarked. Only city in the universe.
That's right. So you guys intentionally created, an inclusive environment for our military families. Can you talk a little bit more about that intentionality?
Well, besides the tangible investments that I talked about in the things that are most challenging to our military families today, spouse employment, we talked about recruitment, we talked about, families. Now, when I came in the Marine Corps, you came in 2003, I came in 1976. And so it was quite different. Most of our sergeants and below were not married. Now I think half of them are married, and so it's a whole different dynamic from when I retired in 2015. So what we've done, besides these tangible investments in the greatest challenges, which is childcare, daycare, pre-K for SA, which we make military families a priority, and of course spouse employment and veteran employment, is that so you've got all these investments that we've made. The other thing I want to go back to is San Antonio has 80,000 troops. 85% of them live in the civilian community. So there's no fence line. There really isn't. I think COVID showed us that. I think when we have a disaster, it showed us that. So we make all these investments, but we also reach out to the military. There's always a wall, I believe, between the military and the civilians. There's a civil-military chasm, I think, that exists. We in the city of San Antonio really try to reach out to them, and we also encourage them to reach out to us. And so we have quarterly forums where we sit across from senior military commanders. This is a community now, the city, the county, the business community, and look them in the eye and say, what do you need? And usually they give me a list of about 5 or 6 things that they need, mainly things that they need done on their base, which is not a core competency of the military like landscaping or road repair, core competency of a municipality. Now, does that matter? Of course it matters, because it matters to the active duty, it matters to the families. The other thing I want to cover is the optics piece of it. Yeah, the investments are great, but the optics of the leadership is very important. We do a lot of things in San Antonio. We have Fiesta. I don't know if you're familiar with Fiesta, but it's a hell of a party, not kind of a Mardi Gras, but Hispanic type. But we include the military in every single city municipal activity. We have the largest MLK march in the world, in the city of San Antonio. And of course, every politician wants to get a picture with the mayor, and they're all with a banner. But the 2 people that are always in the front are the mayor and the senior Joint Base San Antonio commander in uniform. That is an optic, and so is everything else that we bring our military community into. I think it's a real strong optic, and it's a real strong display to our young, Marine sailors, airmen, Coast Chiefs that are coming in and seeing this. And I think that makes a heck of a difference. I mean, it's like I said, leadership trumps everything. And when you've got that commander willing to come in and take that picture, when you got the mayor inviting him over, I think that makes a huge difference. So you have the investments, which are necessary, but you also have all the other activities, which we include. I mean, our riverboat parades, our Fiesta parade, everything always has a military component. Even our rodeo.
Even the rodeo. Gotcha. What's really important, I think, that you're touching on is that perception really does frame reality for people.
Absolutely.
Right? That's important. So CT Moss.
Yes.
That's right. I have a question for you as well. Discuss the significance of increasing the voice of diverse military families. These communities, not just community events, civic engagement as well. What does that look like to put some infusion of energy behind those voices? And how can organizations like Blue Star Families and many others lead that work?
Yeah, so that sounds like about 3 questions, but I think I got them. First, I would like to start off by saying, 1, thank you, panel members, for being here. As I thought about what I wanted to discuss today, you all are hitting all of those points of it starts at the top with leadership. I will have to share a quick story about why my daughter joined the Air Force instead of the Army. And I don't think I've told many people this story, but I remember during COVID 2020, she was home from college trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life next. And I'm like, join the Army. And it was at that time in the middle of COVID that we saw on social media General Brown. He was, I don't know Air Force, but he was a commander at the time, and he was sitting with his chief master sergeant, is that what you call them? Sergeant majors in the Army. And they were talking and they were checking into their service members of color and having a very candid conversation. And I just remember looking through my email and seeing a letter from the Sergeant Major of the Army But here it is, this Air Force command actually having a conversation and checking in. And I said to my daughter, Ebony, I changed my mind. You should go to the Air Force, because it starts at the top with leadership. So when we talk about impact, and to answer your question on where do we begin, it absolutely has to start there. So that is really truly what I believe. And how can organizations get involved? Well, Lindsay talked about do your part. She talked about our Welcome Week. You've heard so many of the stories from individuals saying how I've moved 12 times and 11 times. And imagine every single time you're starting over. When I tell my friends from high school, I move every 3 years, they look at me as if I'm an alien. They have no idea what that looks like. They've stayed in the same house all of their life. And so when we move, we now have to start over, find new friends, and the sense of belonging. And so with organizations like ours, Blue Star Families, and our Welcome Week, we really truly are trying to embrace. And so you don't have to be affiliated with the military to embrace someone that may live in your community that is either a active duty military or National Guard or Reserves or a veteran. And so it's just a way of just knocking on the door to say, welcome to the neighborhood. We see you, we hear for you. And so that is really truly a way. Now for others on the more philanthropic and private organizations and sectors like JP Morgan Chase, it really is just truly asking the question, what can we do for you? We're military friendly. We're here for you. And just being open to being honest and saying, I need this and I need help. And I'm struggling with finding a sense of belonging in the community, whether that's church, whether that's run groups, what have you. But I think that's a way for us to all be able to be a part in, do your part.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
It's a perfect commercial. So I want to close with a few things. We often talk about how important each advocate is at every level, but I want to talk a little bit about the power of small acts of kindness, right? Because it is significantly different. That little phone call of, hey, let me stop in and check on a service member, make sure their family's squared away. I remember getting that little care package that the FRG would bring to my spouse, and she'd be like, oh, we got pots and pans, we have all these things and some canned food. And I'm like, oh, nice, right? Because it was just one less thing my brain had to be focused on, which allowed me to focus on mission. So as we look at these small acts of kindness, what they really mean to families, but also, right, how it impacts readiness. Because your service member shows up, orders in hand, ready to go today. Guess what? There's somebody looking at packaged goods. There's somebody saying housing's not ready. We got to find a hotel. All those things really do matter. So if you all could just quickly take 1 minute, and just kind of tell your little piece of what you think about how those small acts of kindness matter. And I want to start at this end and work our way back to the A group over here.
So I'd say the thing that I've learned over the last 2 years watching this play out is that we have to be willing to be part of the community that we want to be in, right? So we have our airmen who do best are those who extend themselves, who go out, right? If you complain because your neighbor never brought you brownies, well, if you didn't go bring your neighbor brownies, you're probably equally as culpable. And so I think there's a huge aspect of that we sometimes are reluctant to really fess up to because we have an active role in this. And if there's anything we can do to encourage contribution to community from the military members, I think we ought to take that opportunity to do it.
So from our standpoint as a community service organization, I'll share a little story. We used to have a young sailor that would come in full masculine uniform, and we have a small community space in our building where people can just drop in, watch TV, hang out, and be. And we would have this sailor that would come in, and they would go in the bathroom, and they would change into their transitioning attire. So they would come back out in a dress and wearing makeup, and they would just sit in our community center, and they would watch TV, and they would talk to other people in the room, and it just was about them being seen. It wasn't about necessarily having anybody talk to them or affirm them. It was just about an ability to sit in a peaceful environment where they could be seen. And that's part of an act of kindness in a very small way, is just seeing people and letting them be who they are, and not judging them for that, not speaking on it, just letting them be.
And that's important. Thank you for that. Sir?
Yeah, this is, I don't know if it's an act of kindness, but I think it's an act of leadership, which I think is an act of kindness. But every service birthday, our mayor, we have and put together a cake cutting ceremony for all the services. And we don't have any Space Force because I think there's only one of them in San Antonio. But anyway, to include the Coast Guard. But what we also do is the commander is usually one of the brigadier generals, and a sergeant major is command master chief. They come in and they cut the cake, oldest, youngest, the whole 9 yards. But what we've also done is asked these commanders to bring every one they can in uniform that's an E3 and below. So you get the rafters in the city hall full of these young airmen, Marines, soldiers during their birthday, and also our veterans. There's about 1,800 veterans in the city of San Antonio. And they're back there in the audience, and all these folks come in there, and the mayor of the 7th largest city in the nation takes the time to go up to every single one of them and shake their hand, wish them a happy birthday, and take pictures with them. And so I think, can you imagine? And I've heard this now. I've been there for 9 years, and I've heard these guys that have come back, and they say, can we do this again in the mayor's office? We have never been to City Hall. I go, yeah, just don't run for office. No, I don't say that. But I mean, I think that is important optic, and it's a leadership optic, and it really makes them feel included in the community.
Thank you.
I have two responses for this. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a food person. So in terms of acts of kindness, there's this, and for anyone who's watched season 3 of The Bear, Olivia Colman's character, she's a chef, she's, talking to this room full of chefs, and she essentially takes him down a peg, and she's like, yes, you're all very good at what you do, but remember all of the people that you are serving food to. They might remember that the food is good, but they remember the company that they were with over that food. So act of kindness is definitely, if I'm picking it, it's definitely a shared meal or breaking bread with people. The other answer that I have to this, though, is a call for people to pay attention to those around them. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago in New Orleans, and it was around the suicide prevention work that we were doing and a number of other organizations are focused on. We were talking about mental health and well-being and upstream solutions and all of that. And one of the acts of kindness or cognition came out in the discussion there as well. One of the individuals who was presenting was talking about a period in his life when he had suicidal ideation, and he was in a bus in tears, surrounded by people, and no one asked how he was doing. So pay attention to the people that you are seated next to. Even if you don't know them, you share a common public space, and you share something, as we saw, like you share an identity. You live in the same city, or you are citizens of the same country, or there's something. So like pay attention and ask. I also lived in Chicago for 20 years, and also shout out to anyone from Chicago. Heart and soul lives in Chicago. And it's a friendly city, and like you see people on the street and they smile and they wave, and you feel better being in those spaces. I also just moved here a week ago from California for the last 3.5 years, and Californians don't do that. So yeah, pay attention, be nice, ask people when they look like they're in need, and then, invite them over for dinner.
Again, back to leadership, right?
Yeah.
How we show up for others. That's really important. CT?
Yeah, so I believe there's a quote from Maya Angelou, and I'll paraphrase it, about no one remembers what you say or said or what you've done, but they remember how you made them feel. And I remember being a E5, Buck Sergeant, working in the command group of then Brigadier General Gwen Bingham. And she had a way of, and I'm like a sponge, I'm just soaking it all in, so honored to just be on the team. And she has a way of just speaking to everyone every morning or wherever she was going and asking, how are you doing and how's your family? Like, I remember that. And it's something that as I moved through the ranks and became a first sergeant, I adopted and something that I did. But man would work from 5 in the morning, and sometimes she is not leaving until 2000 8 p.m. for you civilians, but will come back the next morning with a cake made from scratch for the team. And just those small acts of kindness. And I'm like, man, I should probably like bake cookies or something. Back to food. But just someone being, in such a high level, going home. And it to me was such an act of humility, such an act of kindness to bake a cake from scratch and bring it into the office. And so it's something that made all of us smile, to always ask about our families. And so that's my example.
Can I step in real fast?
Please do.
So I just wanted to share, so much that we do has to be done before crisis, right? That's where this really makes a difference. And you never know what's going on in somebody else's life. And certainly we never see it. So very personal. I'll share. So my daughter, who is now a junior, and she's super excited, I moved her for her junior year. But when she was in elementary school, she had a classmate threaten her life with a knife at school. Then she had some mental health problems and was in inpatient treatment 4 times for suicidal ideations. And in those moments, right, when you're struggling to figure out what to do as a family, it's the community, whatever community you identify with, that catches you and holds you up. And just over 7 months ago, my wife died unexpectedly while I was commanding at Hill Air Force Base. And it was the community, both inside the base and off the base, that truly propped our family up and allowed us to keep going. So the work that we do to build community, it really, really matters, right? Because it's what gets us through. No one does life by themselves. And so every act of kindness, nothing is too small, and everything is great.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So as we conclude, I have just a few homework assignments for everybody. So I hope you've been taking notes. If not, Kathy's going to be checking. So I want to make sure we kind of recap really quickly 5 really important key points here. The first is the critical role of belonging in the military family space, right? It is vitally important to our national security that we continue to support our warfighters and, most importantly, support those people who support them. Right? So that's an important takeaway. The importance of shared identity and also those connectors within community. We serve on base, we work on base, we are everything on base, but we quite frankly are often existing off of that base, right? Over 85% of your folks are in the community. So how we integrate in community, how we function within community, how community welcomes us, is also vitally important. So for those of us in community, let's think through how we're engaging and supporting our military families, because those things do matter. And practical strategies of fostering inclusive environments for both individuals as well as families. How we reach out, how we welcome, how we listen, and how we share, those are all vital things. And they're instrumental in how we support the work that takes place. And more importantly, right, how we affect readiness, which is vital to our nation's mission through our military. The military leadership and culture shifts, but often ahead of generation populations. I was thinking about when you said when you joined some time ago, I'll say, how different it was in the 70s, in the 80s. Now we see, again, we're post-war and what people call peacetime army. But guess what? We still deploy. We're still actively engaged in combat around the globe. We're still supporting security and readiness. And I think that's also important for us to remember, because every single day, especially for the Air Force, we're going to scramble a fighter somewhere as we speak right now today. And that family is still going to be concerned about that loved one coming back. And that impacts how we exist within our workforce, but also within our community. So it's always something to be cognizant of. And then finally, continuous effort required to support and include diverse military families. I cannot overemphasize that our families today look so different than they did some time ago. And that means we have to embrace all of them and everything that they bring to bear. We need every single hand in this fight. And I'm personally a little too old for that fight again. The needs are not going to do it. But we do have to make sure that we're telling our young people that there is a place in our country in its defense, in its security, and they are necessities for that work. So I want to first ask you to applaud our audience. our panelists. Thank you all for traveling so far. And Kathy, thank you again for having me and allowing me to participate. And thank you everyone from Blue Star Families.